Not going to say a lot about Janette, who is still up here, believe it or not. Applaud her because this is a marathon session for her. For those of you that are here this morning, you heard the introduction. For those of you that weren't, with Janette is Inessa Santos, and I'm going to do a quick bio for Inessa. Inessa has 16 years of experience providing trusted business counsel to technology startups, scale-ups, matters of blockchain, fintech, biz development, corporate law, corporate governance, intellectual property, technology, securities. Inessa frequently lectures, universities, conferences all around Florida on all kinds of technology topics. She also is been recently voted to Orlando's best lawyers. She mentors Orlando's technology accelerator called the Starter Studio. She's a director of the Florida Blockchain Business Association. She's also an active member, as is Janette, of the Technology Committee. And she recently did a blockchain formal study program on blockchain strategies in fintech at Oxford University. So we're going to move on from the practical to the theoretical here. And this session is really on the future of technology and how it may affect the legal profession and what you're doing day to day. So I'm going to let Janette have it back and Inessa have it. Thanks.
Thank you again for coming back and joining us for the next 50 minutes as we talk about the future of technology. It is going to be very interesting. Please know that this is more of a high-level presentation. It's not going to get into the hands-on. Hopefully, our goal at the end of this presentation is that you are going to start thinking about how technology in the next 2 months, 2 years, 5 years is really going to affect you, affect your practice, and really affect our society when you see the presentation as we move forward. Okay, yeah, hit the green button. All right, yep, perfect. All of this information also will be under legal fuel, as well as the last presentation under 3214 as the course number. So I know I can't see too well, but with a show of hands, how many people have ever heard of Internet of Things, IoT? Excellent. So we've got about 15 maybe people in here. Wonderful. Internet of Things, quite frankly, is anything that connects to the internet. It could be your car if you have OnStar. It could be your washing machine, your refrigerator. It's anything that uses the internet technology, an internal or external environment to connect you to the internet. And according to Gartner, and Gartner in the tech world is our guru, IoT is not only about the introduction of different forms of network devices into the business, but it's also the transformational approach to viewing and implementing process, analytics, storage, and communications. So the number one device that most people are aware of and they think of when they think of IoT is going to be your smartphone, your cell phone. Gartner is forecasting 25 billion IoT-based devices installed by 2020. And for people like myself in government, we're looking at 6.8 billion just in smart cities alone. What does that mean? That means if the police are driving by and they have a scanner, the license plate scanner, that is an IoT. It's connected to the internet. They're able to download information from a remote database. The other thing that we're working on and looking at is how are the self-driven cars going to work when they're able to park themselves? Do we still need parking lots or parking spaces with enough room to open doors on each side? So for government, it's definitely taking a whole new philosophy and train of thought on how are we going to deal with these different technologies. In government alone, by 2020, we're going to be spending $476 billion on IoTs. It's going to be new, it's going to be innovative, and it really is going to change the way that we interact with each other and the way that you can interact with your government agencies. So most important to understand, we talked about this a little last time. You have your laptop, you have your phone, you have your iPad. and they are not secured devices. Your smart TVs, your appliances, wearable, smart cars. For me, one of the most scary things is more and more people are having Google Home, Siri, Alexa, all of these devices that listen in your house, and it's not secure. So there's been newspaper articles recently about how, just for example, on the Alexa side, on the Amazon side, where apparently they're listening to you all the time. What does that mean for our expectation of privacy in our own home? What happens when someone wants to do a subpoena and get those records from your home? Apparently, not too long ago, I apologize for not having the case, but it was used, in the case of a murder, the Alexa was subpoenaed and used as evidence for the instance that happened. Apparently it was caught on the Alexa device. So you have to remember, especially as lawyers, if you have Alexa in your office or you have that OnStar or On Demand in your car, what sense of privacy do you actually have? There are ways that you can turn it off. If you do use Alexa in your office for music and things like that, I highly recommend that you think about or look into the options to turn off that device, especially when you're speaking with your clients. We want to make sure that you're not getting information out there that really should not be out there. So we're being tracked, and this is where Anessa has put so much time and energy. We talked about this just 2 years ago. We were brainstorming because we're talking about big data and we're talking about analytics and what is it going to look for in what's it going to look like in our society in just 2 years. It was, conceptual at the time, but where we've been and where we are today, she jumped into it and really became a champion of dealing with the big data analytics. And I'd like to turn it over to her to give you some, not scary, but some facts on what's happening today, on what's being tracked, where it's being stored, and how it's being deleted.
Okay, well, you surprised me. You turned it over a few slides earlier than we discussed, but that's okay. I can take it away. You have been up here and educating us for quite some time, so we appreciate that. Well, it was actually Janette that kind of put me onto this, and in a couple of slides, I'll point it out to you as to how that happened. I'll tell you a little bit about that story. We'll get into it, but first, I think just to sort of play a little bit on what Janette was saying is that it's important for you to understand that our big tech companies are listening into every single conversation that you have. So, in fact, they're listening to us right now. Even when you turn your cell phone off, it actually can be remotely activated. The microphone can be turned on, the video camera can be turned on. If you have your laptop open and you're doing things right now, it's an absolute possibility that your laptop can be watching you back. Your smart TV is watching you watching it. And this is really kind of wild because it's like, well, why would they be watching me inside of my home? Well, one thing, there's entertainment value for the engineers working on the other side. But the real commercial value is that they are tracking your face, and they're doing this on Facebook right now, right? They've got employed facial recognition technology to be able to read your facial expressions while you're scrolling through Facebooks and you're being hit with ads. And they're deploying this in smart TVs as well. So, if you have these devices in your office and you're having super sensitive conversations, especially with Amazon's Alexa, which is being deployed on the hardware device called Echo, it is listening into your office conversations and it's recording it. The Washington Post reported on or around May 6th, so here just recently, that it's recording your conversations and it's storing them and it's rereading them to train the artificial intelligence on natural language processing so that it gets better to listening in. So the code word is Alexa, or the code word is Siri, or the code word is Hey Google, but it's listening to a lot more.
Well, Anessa, there are so many different apps out there. I mean, I don't know. I happen to belong to Facebook. I'm on Messenger. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. I don't put a lot out there. I am very careful because I understand what's out there does stay out there. We're not in Vegas. Snapchat, WhatsApp. I mean, Snapchat, my nephew's 15 years old. He thinks he's nice and safe because it's only there for 15 seconds. WeChat, Telegram, all of these devices, are any of them secure? Are any of them safe for us to use as attorneys when we're talking to our clients and we want matters to be confidential?
Well, that's a really important question. I'm glad you asked that because we think that some of them are secure. So let's take WhatsApp for an example. WhatsApp used to be an independent messaging application that you would download onto your phone. Now, ironically, not a lot of folks in North America, well, with the exclusion of Mexico, Mexicans use it. But Canadians and Americans, by and large, don't traditionally utilize WhatsApp for their conversations. But this was being used by everybody else on the planet because it was a way for them to make phone calls, video calls using data and not having to pay the phone companies for it. But Facebook caught on to the WhatsApp use around the world and how it was increasing, and they were like, hey, let's purchase that. Well, we all knew that Facebook was completely 100% insecure. We knew this, we knew it before the Cambridge Analytica scandal, but folks were chatting on it anyway, and then they purchased WhatsApp. So here's the funny thing. So I was at Oxford about a month ago, and I was, in their fintech lab, and we had this Silicon Valley lady who's like the queen of all things fintech, and she came and she talked to us, and she was like, how secure can WhatsApp be if it's owned by Facebook? And we were all like, rah, rah, right? Like, we get it. 1 week later, the story blew. WhatsApp is not secure. So here's what we can tell you. LinkedIn, not secure. Twitter, not secure. Instagram, no. Facebook Messenger, no. Snapchat, no. WhatsApp, no. WeChat is what you have to use if you live in China or you can't exist. You generally just don't exist. You have zero identity if you do not have a WeChat identity in China. That is like totally under 100% surveillance. It's like Big Brother on steroids, right? So WeChat, totally not secure. Telegram and Signal are outlawed in both Russia and China. So here's what I think. This is my professional advice and the advice of my crazy engineering colleagues. We're like, well, if Russia and China don't want you using it, it's likely secure, right? So that's kind of the standard that we're employing. But with that being said, what's really crazy is that I have clients, because I represent, tech startups and scale-ups and stuff. So these guys are like, crazy hair on fire, sort of engineer nuts people, and they're absolutely hilarious, and I love them. And they insist on sending me like highly secure and confidential information via WhatsApp. And I'm like, dude, right? You know that we ought to be like transferring this to Telegram? And they're like, I know. So they do it anyway, and I can't stop them, but I did send it to them in writing. So I suggest that if you've got clients who insist on communicating via this insecure channels, and they're doing this with highly sensitive data, put it in writing that you've recommended to them, stop it, and that maybe you've suggested some alternative channels for communication, and then they've insisted anyway, at least you've got some CYA on your side.
You're informing your client. At the end of the day, inform your client. You are now made aware that there is some possibility for breach. There is some possibility that someone can be listening. And inform your client. An informed client, maybe they'll be a little less likely to send the information. Some will. Some will ultimately say, I don't care, and do it, or think, why would they want my information? Which could be true, but they're taking the risk, and they're taking an informed risk. So, I have my phone, and I deleted everything. I just wiped my device.
Or your laptop.
Or my laptop.
Or your tablet.
Device erasure does not equal data erasure. If you have an iOS, if you have an Android, if you have any kind of device that is connected to a cloud, it is going to be backing up to the cloud. Your data will be stored in the cloud. A lot of those servers are not even in this country. So you have to remember, once you put something on your phone, unfortunately, I have this conversation with kids a lot. I'll go into the schools and try talking to them about inappropriate pictures, doing things that they should not be doing and think it's so cool, and they put it on their phone. As some of you may have heard recently, a gentleman, I feel terrible for him. This kid was at the Parkland MSD shooting, and he became an advocate for what he believed in, and he put the information, he got accepted into Harvard, and his life was wonderful. All of a sudden, doing a little bit of searching, they found out that he had made inappropriate racist comments years ago. His application has been rescinded from Harvard. He's just lost that part of his future for something he did, being young and stupid, so to speak. Don't be young and stupid. Realize what you put out there is going to stay out there. Even if you feel that you have the most secure device, if it's getting backed up to the cloud, if it's going to a network center, you have no control over it. When I worked for the state attorney, I can tell you it was super easy to get a subpoena and get your information. For a civil matter, it may take a little bit more. I worked on another matter where I was able to prove a person was in a specific location just by the cell towers this individual was hitting while going up to near Tallahassee. They were going to a prison in Stark, Florida. They swore to me that they were not going to that prison. Just from hitting the cell towers, I could tell them what direction they took and where they went. You present that to the judge, it's powerful evidence that can be used against you. I ended up winning that case just based on showing that this person did in fact do what they said that they were not doing. Mm-hmm. So when you erase or wipe your device, it's still there, don't think it's gone. If you have copiers in your office, I highly recommend purchase your hard drive from the copier. They will allow you to purchase your hard drive and take some of that frustration that you may have and beat it up.
I did that to my daughter's iPhone once.
Yeah, that happens. Yeah. So take a hammer to it. That is how you're going to destroy it. So if you have things in your copier and your lease is up, highly recommend that you purchase the hard drive. Do not give it back to them with the hard drive, because now you have literally just gave him all of your information. So deleting is going to be important, making sure, even if you delete, by the way, Janette, I went in and I deleted my device, I deleted my iCloud account, I deleted everything. Well, guess what? Your cloud services makes backups. So there's a backup of a backup of a backup. When you think it's gone, it's going to still be there, and you need to just be cognitive of that.
Yeah, it propagates like cell division, and deleting it is like a game of horrendous whack-a-mole. So just be careful what you put out there.
So what are we doing with all of this data? I can tell you, for marketing purposes, it is amazing. They want your information so badly. I'll give you an example. When I worked for the schools, they gave all the kids, there was a promotion that a certain cell phone company was doing, and the promotion from this company was to give, they wanted every kid, or it was at that point every high schooler, to have a cell phone, and they were giving it to them for free. Parents didn't have to pay for any kind of data plan. Well, they have two reasons for doing that. One, they want to get the data. Now, they can't get the personal identification or personal identifiable data. That would be illegal. That's against FERPA. We had to make sure that they could not do it for personal identifiable data. But what they wanted was the aggregate. what are the 9 through 12 year, or 9th graders through 12th graders looking at? What are they doing? They encourage them to play games on it. That information will get sold to gamers, to big tech companies, because that's how they're going to make their product better and meet the needs of these kids. So they were given these free cell phones, and their first motive, in my opinion, is that they wanted to see what are they doing with the cell phone. The second one is when you graduate high school and you've had this cell phone with XYZ company for the last 4 years, who do you think you're going to buy your cell phone plan with? Who are you going to upgrade your phone with? Most people get comfortable in the technology that they use. So I thought it was brilliant on their part, but the fact that if nothing's being given away for nothing. Something's not being given away for nothing. Go ahead, we'll go into progressive.
Yeah, they're basically just conditioning us. Apple is the great conditioner. Their technology is largely proprietary, and it doesn't play well with others. So if you use Apple devices, then you know you're sort of like trapped in the Apple loop, that you have to use all Apple devices, and you can only talk to other people that use Apple devices without encountering some difficulty. So what are we doing with all of this data? Well, we're using it some good cases and some evil cases, and we're going to take a look at some of that. So today, more or less, I think that the common thread throughout all of the CLE in this room today is data, 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 data analytics, data management and blockchain, data security, data privacy. And so what we are encountering here is what I like to refer to as the fourth industrial revolution. Well, I don't really think that I came up with that term on my own, but this is what's happening. And so we've got mountains and mountains and mountains of data. We even have data about data, metadata, as Janette educated us on. And so we're analyzing it with algorithms. And so it's kind of hard to see on this slide. It looked a lot better on my laptop when I built it this way. But, you know, some of the things that I want to point out here, I'm having a hard time looking. What do we use it for? Oh, here's one that I wanted to point out. Trial attorney success rates. So my buddy Toby Unwin, I think it's your laptop, is giving feedback. Yeah, my buddy Toby Unwin in Orlando has this great data analytics company called Premonition. What's really interesting is that before the clerk of courts could catch on to what he was doing, he was scraping all of the data as to exactly what was going on in every single one of the cases in all of America. It was really amazing. So he started crunching numbers and discovering, like, what were the characteristics of trial attorneys that were winning, what kinds of cases were they winning, what was the size of the win, who were the parties involved, and so he compiled this really great software that tells you about who you want to hire for your case. There's data analytics about when you're going to die. This nearly terrified me. I like to scroll through the news on my apps on my phone before I go to bed, and then I couldn't sleep after I saw this headline. I didn't open it up and I didn't read it. But what I gleaned from the headline is that now data analytics and data about our lives and the footprints and my Fitbit that I have on today that says that I've walked 6,686 steps, right? That it can tell us within weeks of accuracy as to what our health looks like and when we're going to die. So data is crunching everything, and this is the fourth industrial revolution. So now I'm just going to like sort of swing us all the way to the absolute extremes of things. And I'm so excited about it because what you're seeing here is a screenshot that I took from a documentary by ABC News Australia that was published in September 18th of 2018. Why would I do this? What are you looking at? Okay, remember how I talked about a little bit earlier that if you don't have WeChat in China, you don't exist? I am so not exaggerating. What you are looking at on this screen is through the eye of China's large network surveillance system. You'll see folks and these like rectangular boxes around them, and then you'll sort of see what I think might be Mandarin characters and a number, like the one in the front says 552. That, ladies and gentlemen, is her social credit score. China has implemented Big Brother on big steroids. And so they have a system of over 200 million CCTV cameras. They have pioneered artificial intelligence with facial recognition technology and multi-factor biometric authentication to identify every single one of their 1 billion Chinese citizens and growing. And they rate you. They rate you in the grocery store because they have cameras watching what you put in your cart. And if you watch this documentary, it's like really wild because you're actually watching it through the AI system. So like, when the lady that's being interviewed and she's shopping and she takes a bottle of wine off the counter and she puts it in the cart, her social credit score goes down. When she takes it out and puts it back on the shelf, her social credit score goes back up. Why do we care? Because if your social credit score is too low, you are denied a passport. You're denied a train ticket. You cannot leave. You're fired from your job. Your kids can't go to very good schools. You're not eligible for a promotion. So this is the absolute maximum. And if you are thinking, oh, that could never happen here, think again. This is Orlando, my home. So Amazon has pioneered this AI surveillance software called Recognition with a K. That is not a typo. And they have a relationship with the Orlando law enforcement. And what they're doing is they're taking extra available bandwidth in those street cameras that I despise. And if there's available bandwidth, then what they're doing is they're surveilling who it is that's walking across the street. And you can't see it really well here, but you probably could if you downloaded it from Legal Fuel.
Let me jump in.
Okay.
So, first slide, we're dealing with the social credits. First thing that came to my mind, and this is, again, we have talked about this ad nauseum, was TransUnion, Experian. I think of how we have our our credit system now, which right now is a credit bureau, which is basically reporting. With that system, we're able to dispute it, we're able to fight it. We have a little bit of control. It's a pain in the butt, but we have a little bit of control. What's happening in China, and by the way, it's not just China, because other governments are now looking into this technology.
They're selling it.
Thinking this might be good for
Venezuela,
for our nation. Mm-hmm. So what's happening, it's not like, oh my gosh, that's only gonna happen to China. Mm-mm. Then when we fast forward to this slide, what's very interesting, and I will tell you again, you know I worked in government, and one of the departments I was in, we got grants that we could put cameras up on the streets. Well, because we got grants and where the money and the funding came from for those grants, we specifically had a clause that we would not provide those access to those cameras to law enforcement today. So the reason that law enforcement cannot use those cameras today is because of the funding source in which we put the cameras in. However, in Orlando, it is Amazon, who really is a conglomerate of a company. They have the money. They're willing to give government the cameras. They're willing to do the installation. They're willing to put it up. And if anyone here works in government, you have to know that we love getting money. You know, we are on a budget that's fixed based on taxes. So when a conglomerate like Amazon comes in and says, hey, we have a really cool idea. We want to put up these surveillance videos. They can't, for right now, this is what they're going to be used for. So right now, they are going to be used for Amazon. There's nothing to say down the road we cannot have some type of agreement where law enforcement can use them.
Well, this particular contract is specifically for law enforcement purposes, just to be clear. They're using it for, well, it's a beta test site is what it is, but the recognition surveillance software is literally to aid law enforcement in identifying and locating suspects. And we have some concerns about this.
Slippery slope.
Yeah, it is an absolute slippery slope. And this is where Janette we were chatting about it about a year ago, and she was talking to me about, you know, data and data analytics and big data and bigoted, data analytics for for algorithms and whatnot. And so I think what's important to recognize here is that we've got issues, folks. And if you're like, well, how does this really relate to me in the practice of law? Well, obviously, you've learned for this from earlier sessions that this is evidence that can be subpoenaed, or maybe evidence that needs to be suppressed, or maybe it's in violation of your Fifth Amendment rights, or maybe it's violating your due process rights. And so this is all stuff that's available and ready for the taking for the prosecution or the plaintiff or the defense, as the case may be. But it's important for us as attorneys who are trying these cases and representing our clients, and we need to be passionate about what's really going on out there, that you can't put blind faith in data, and it's got to stop. It's got to stop. We can't just blindly trust these big four tech companies, because studies are showing that the Amazon recognition performs better on lighter-skinned people, and it performs better on men than it does in women. And so when we see our law enforcement is engaging in behavior based upon the results of the software that's been deployed and being utilizing, it's creating problems because they're targeting folks, and they might be targeting the wrong folks, right? And so I put up there this quote by Claire Garvey of the Center on Privacy and Technology, which I loved. I loved this, right? She says, this kind of technology is akin to police walking through a public protest and making everyone show their identification. We would be appalled if that was permitted. Now, law enforcement can do that in secret. And so the next slide is what Janette and I are both really passionate about. She introduced me to the algorithm queen, Kathy O'Neill, who has this amazing TEDx talk. And she calls algorithms weapons of math destruction. And we need to understand what algorithms are at their core, right? What is an algorithm? We think, well, it sounds like math. I can trust math, right, Janette? 2 + 2 = 4. So isn't an algorithm math? It's not.
Absolutely.
No. So what an algorithm does is it's a formula, and it takes a cache or a store of data that you have selected. And maybe the data is from a time period to a time period about this particular event or whatever it is, but you set these parameters for selecting the data in a data pool. You might remember something like this if you took statistics way forever long ago for me, right? And so then you're like, okay, so now I want to learn about the data, about the past, and I'm going to define a definition of success, and I'm going to apply this algorithm, and then the algorithm is going to spit me out an answer, like a formula. But because we're only using past data, things that have only happened, it's static in the information that it can provide for the solution that we are seeking. So what am I talking about, right? It sounds like a foreign language right now. Okay, so I'm going to apply it to something that we can all understand. A case where we had an algorithm go rogue was with Fox News. So in the Me Too movement in 2016, over 20 women complained about sexual harassment. So Roger Ailes was ousted, and then the powers that be got together and in their infinite wisdom decided to apply an algorithm to the hiring processes. So what did they do? They looked at past hiring, and the definition of success was someone who had actually stayed at Fox for 4 years and who had been promoted at least once. Well, the problem with that is that because of rampant gender discrimination, women didn't stay there for 4 years, and they had not been promoted at least once. So now we have, right, a chauvinistic algorithm at work. And so then, not surprisingly, if the algorithm was reading the resumes and figuring out who the best candidates were, then it was going to look like a white man, somebody who had been repeatedly hired. So you see, the data source is important to interrogate. Okay, another really good example that gets me like all really feisty is about black box algorithms. Black box algorithms, it means like, well, the data is secret, it's super secured, and we're not going to tell you how we did it. And so this was implied in 3 programs across the United States in criminal sentencing. Now, I'm a former public defender, and I remember we used to score out what the sentence would be by hand on a score sheet. And it was relatively easy. I could management, and I am no good at math, right? So Compass is one such software program that was employed in Broward County, right? Yep, it was Broward County. Yeah, she knows. And so they had this algorithm at work, and the algorithm was used to score out the defendants to determine what their sentence was going to be. And what we found out is because they were using data from the past, and in the past, blacks were sentenced much more heavily than whites, and blacks were targeted for arrest, and there was a lot of discrimination going on in the sentencing. The algorithm read that past data, and so that same bigotry was propagated and continued. And so these algorithms, when they were questioned, well, they pled trade secret protection. One such example was these two gentlemen that you see right here.
Real quick.
Yes.
20% accuracy. The algorithm itself only had a 20% accuracy if there would be a repeat crime.
Yeah, so basically it sucked like a Hoover. Okay, it was really sucky. And so Kathy O'Neill talks about data laundering, and it's where technologists hide ugly truths, I'm just gonna quote her because she's really good at what she says, in black box algorithms, and they call them objective and meritocratic, and that's bullcrap. And I don't like it, and I don't want anybody in this room to stand for it. And we're seeing this happen with credit scores and insurance rates and the way that people are being treated. So as you can see here, Bernard here on the left, he scored a 10 out of 10, is super high risk for recidivism, whereas Dylan scored 3 out of 10, he scored low risk, but looky here. Bernard has no previous criminal history, he should have scored lower. Dylan had a previous criminal record with a felony, but he was treated as white, therefore he got a lower score and a lower sentencing time when the algorithm was applied. Ooh, this is something that you really like, autonomous vehicles. This is like one of your big interests. We talked about that.
I didn't do that one.
So MIT Media Labs, she brought this up earlier when she was talking about how autonomous vehicles, and we're going to have to figure out what happens. So algorithms are going to decide who lives and who dies. Now, normally, these kinds of ethical discussions would happen back in law school. You might remember, right? So if a train stays on the track and it's going to hit a car full of teenagers, maybe they're hotboxing, I don't know, right? Or is the conductor going to like flip the switch and the track's going to go over here and it's going to hit like a mother and a baby in a stroller? Who lives and who dies? Our algorithms are making these decisions, and MIT Media Labs was like, well, you know, how do Americans really feel about this? What do Americans say about who lives and who dies? So they developed a game, and they had lots and lots and lots of people play the games, and basically, this is the score. So preference in favor of sparing characters in the game is we really want to save the stroller, but we want to save the stroller more than we save the girl or a boy or a pregnant woman, doctors, athletes, and then we come down and what we're finding out is that large women, we don't really care so much about them, but we care even less about a large man, the homeless, the elderly. We don't seem to have any respect for the elderly at all. We're ready to just take them right out. And then, of course, dogs, criminals, and cats. Now, I don't really know.
A dog is higher than a criminal.
Yeah, but what's crazy is how do you know if it's a criminal?
Exactly.
I mean, are they like do they look menacing with a gun? I'm not really sure. I didn't play the game. But the point is that as attorneys, we have an ethical obligation, an ethical responsibility to ourselves, to our families, to our clients, to our communities, to the state in which we live and where we practice, to be aware of what is going on and to lift our voices in some sort of unison, because I taught a 3-hour course in ethics and data analytics at the College of Engineering for a master's program in network science. I taught the folks that already have job offers before they even graduate. They're the ones that are writing these algorithms. They are the ones that are deciding who lives and who dies. And the professor of the program had me come in and he had me teach them because he said to me, he said, nobody in these graduate level network science programs are talking about the ethics of these algorithms and the impact that it's going to make. And that's our job as lawyers.
Well, now we get into the fun stuff, a deep fake. Everyone is hearing nowadays about the deep fake, and what does that even mean? Well, deep fake basically is where people are using, generally techs, generally geeks, are using technology, and they can take a particular image, and if you look on the far left, and they can turn it into a completely different image, a different person. They take it one step further. I believe it was University of Washington, and I think we have a clip on this, but one step further, they can take an individual who has provided a speech, like me speaking up here in public, someone can come and take that, and then through AI, learning my expressions, learning how my mouth moves, learning how my eyes move, my hands, my body language, they can make it as though I said something completely different. I think it's huge for all of us to understand. It used to be that, oh, I believe half of what I see, a quarter of what I read. I actually believe it less. If you see a video, and unfortunately, I know, again, when I was working with schools, this is really going to be a problem, and it has been a little bit of a problem in bullying, is they'll take someone's face and they'll put it onto someone else's body, or they'll take their voice and they'll put it on as though they were speaking. And there are tools right now that teenagers can do this. This is not something where you have to go to school for 8 years and be this genius engineer to be able to make these changes. There are programs out there that they can do this right now. So when you are looking at evidence, it is so important that it's not, that you can't just take it for granted of what you're seeing, that it's an absolute truth. Because there are times, and that's where it's going to be very difficult, especially for us as lawyers, is when we're trying to prove something where they could put someone in, let's just say a workers' comp, and someone gets put in as though they are walking across the street or riding on a jet ski, you know, because they don't like someone, and they get a hold of it at their job. What do you think is going to happen to their workers' comp claim? So you've got to understand that the deep fake is there, it is out there, and it's not that difficult to do. Again, this presentation will be available online for you to look through it, because we got about 5 minutes. I do want to have questions, but I think what we should show them the video and give them an idea.
Yeah, and a final note, just in case you wondered, artificial intelligence plus computer-generated images is what equals deep fakes. Tools available on the internet. Anybody can do it, and it's so frickin' amazing that it's undetectable right now by the FBI, the CIA. It's uncrackable. Okay, so hopefully this is going to work, because this has been a lot of serious stuff. You know, I was like, what's the government doing about all of this? This is what...
If I move from here and go over there and sit with my Democrat friends, which will make them real nervous, does Google track my movement? Does Google, through this phone, know that I have moved here and moved over to the left?
Not by default. There may be a Google service which you've opted into use, and if...
So Google knows that I am moving over there. It's not a trick question. You know, you make $100 million a year, you ought to be able to answer that question. Does Google know through this phone that I am moving over there and sitting next to Mr. Johnson? It's yes or no.
I won't be able to answer without looking at...
You can't say yes or no.
Without knowing more details.
Yes or no?
I genuinely don't know without knowing what
I'm shocked you don't know. I think Google obviously does.
Would you agree to allow an independent entity to study your search results for political bias? I know you've have individuals studying that now, but you appointed them. Would you allow a third-party, independent, outside organization to study your search results and cooperate with them to determine the degree, or if any, of political bias?
To date, there have been independent third-party studies looking at search results. The Economist did.
But you chose those third parties. I'm talking about someone truly independent.
We didn't choose those third parties. I mean, they completed those studies.
If you Google the word idiot under images, a picture of Donald Trump, comes up. I just did that. How would that happen? How does search work so that that would occur?
For any time you type in a keyword, we've gone out and crawled and stored copies of billions of web pages in our index. And we take the keyword and match it against web pages and rank them based on over 200 signals. Things like relevance, freshness, popularity, how other people are using it. And based on that, at any given time, we try to rank and find the best results for that query. And then we evaluate them with external raters to make sure that, and they evaluate it to objective guidelines. And that's how we make sure the process is working.
So it's not some little man sitting behind the curtain figuring out what we're going to show the user. It's basically a compilation of what users are generating and trying to sort through that information.
We don't manually intervene on any particular search result.
I have a 7-year-old granddaughter who picked up her phone before the election, and she's playing a little game, kind of game a kid would play, and up on there pops a picture of her grandfather. And I'm not going to say into the record what kind of language was used around that picture of her grandfather, but I'd ask you, how does that show up on a 7-year-old's iPhone who's playing a kid's game?
Congressman, iPhone is made by a different company, and so,
it might have been an Android. It was a hand-me-down of some kind.
Also, to my knowledge, you've never sanctioned any employee for any type of, for manipulating the search results whatsoever. Is that the case?
It's not possible for an individual employee or groups of employees to manipulate our search results. We have a robust framework, including many steps in the process.
Well,
and
my time is up. Let me just say I disagree. I think humans can manipulate the process. It is a human process at its base. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're back.
Have you considered having an online school that people could go to with a Google rep, and you could kind of log in and kind of ask questions, or have Google, and not like Comcast where you get put on hold for 30 minutes and then find somebody who you can't understand?
Janette, I think we're in trouble.
Yes, we're just about out of time. So again, this is online. As we told you at the beginning, we wanted to give you something to think about. There is a phenomenal video on YouTube with Obama, and it's the Obama simulation. It was done at a university. If you want to take a look at it, you can see that through YouTube. It would be Obama simulation AI, and take a look. And just again, the reason we're here is just to make you aware, to let you know what's out there and give you something to think about. When you see something, say, I can't believe that happened, it may not have.
Right. And Congress clearly is not going to be able to help us sort it out. So if you encounter an algorithm at work in your practice, remember to go back, take a look at this 5 steps to algorithmic integrity that is recommended by our algorithm queen, Kathy O'Neill. Also look her up on TEDx. It's an amazing discussion. Or just feel free to reach out to me and Janette. We'll be happy to help you.
Thank you.
Anyone not terrified? That's pretty.